I just spent 1 month analyzing 100 individual credit reports with a perfect 850 credit score. And today I'm going to share with you the 5 similarities that I noticed to help you get that perfect credit score and save hundreds of thousands of dollars. All right, let's jump right into it. What is going on, everyone? I hope you are all having a fantastic day. So, unfortunately, I wasn't kidding. Instead of going out and partying like a normal 20-year-old, my wife and I prefer to sit at home and watch The Bachelorette while I sift through hundreds of case studies on how to get a perfect 850 credit score. Very exciting, I know, but after spending countless hours on this, I noticed 5 similarities across a majority of these individuals, which are the age of their credit, how many accounts each of them had, their higher credit limit than the national average, their lower balance than the national average, and an increased credit mix. Now, if you're familiar with how your credit score is calculated, then you probably recognize the correlation between the 5 major variables that I identified and the ways that your score is calculated, which is your payment history, the amount that you owe, the length of your credit history, new lines of credit, and your credit mix. But that's all cookie cutter information that you can find anywhere, and today we are shooting for perfection. So, taking a closer look at those 5 similarities across all the individuals with perfect credit that I looked at, a majority of them had at least one account that is 25 years or older. That statistic is a little demotivating at first because that means that they have credit accounts that are older than me. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have accounts that are decades old in order to achieve that perfect credit. So, the first lesson here is, number 1, if you have not yet opened some kind of credit line, even if that is just a free credit card, then you want to do that as soon as possible because building a perfect credit score is going to take some time. The second lesson is also fairly obvious, but that is do not close old credit accounts unless you absolutely have to. I'm not saying hang on to old debt as long as possible. Please do not do that. But what I mean by this is if you have your very first credit card that you opened years ago and you no longer use that product, which is actually the case for me, then even though you don't use it, just leave it opened because closing that account will have a huge impact on the average age of your credit. That segues nicely into the second and third similarities that I noticed before we get to some of the really crazy statistics, but that would be the number of accounts that these individuals have and their overall credit mix. On average, these individuals had 10 or more lines of credit actively on their reports, and that included a mix of credit cards, mortgages, a wide variety of consumer debts, and who knows what else. Now, this is where I have to walk a fine line personally because I do feel that you never want to take on any kind of debt that is not being used to leverage your money towards an appreciating asset. That's basically just a really fancy way of saying I've only ever borrowed money to purchase my house, which is an appreciating asset. Yes, of course I use credit cards, but I've never paid a penny in interest or fees to a single credit card company. I've never missed a payment, and I always pay off every card in full. But I also recognize that I'm totally saying that from a place of privilege, so if you do have a car loan or student loans or personal loans and those very normal types of consumer debt, then I would still encourage you to pay them off as fast as possible. But the silver lining is that this does actually increase your credit mix, which is in turn good for your credit score and can help you achieve that 850 credit score. Now, that does not mean that you should go and apply for 4 credit cards, a car loan, a mortgage, and all of that stuff in one day, but just something that you want to keep in the back of your head if you really are striving for that perfect score. Okay, so those first 3 similarities are kind of the boring, obvious ones, but these next 2 similarities are jaw-dropping when compared to the national averages. And those would be the total credit that these perfect credit score individuals have and the average balance that they carry on their accounts. Just in credit cards alone, I noticed that most of them have a total available credit of over $100,000, which is hard to wrap my head around considering the national average credit limit is just $22,000. And while that is totally unnecessary for most individuals, in my opinion, getting higher available credit is another one of those things that's going to take some time, so don't kick this down the road too far. And I've also made some videos on how to dramatically increase your credit limit that I'll link to down in the description. So your available credit might not sound that important, and on its own, it's really not. However, your total available credit and your total balance is used to calculate what's called your credit utilization, which accounts for 30% of your credit score. And this is where the individuals I studied really stand out. You see, if you have a total credit limit of just $10,000, for example, and you spent $10,000, then your credit utilization would be 100%, which is absolutely horrible for your credit score. But if you had a total available credit of $100,000, but spent that same $10,000, that would be a credit utilization of just 10%. So, assuming your spending stays the same, by increasing your total available credit, you are essentially decreasing your credit utilization, which again has a huge impact on your score. Now, the average utilization in the US is 25%, which is okay, but the perfect credit score individuals that I looked at had an average debt utilization of less than 1%. And they achieved this using a little-known credit card loophole. When it comes to credit cards specifically, there is a day each month that your statement is processed, and whatever the balance is on your card on that day is what will be posted to your statement balance. But as long as you know what day of the month that statement is processed, you can and actually should pay off your card prior to that date. So what I mean by this is, let's say throughout the month you spent $5,000 in your credit card. Well, instead of waiting for your statement to be processed at the end of the month and then making that payment, you can actually pay off that amount in full before that statement date, meaning despite the fact that you spent $5,000, your statement will show a balance of 0 because you already paid it off. And that, combined with increasing the amount of credit that you have available to you, is again good for your utilization. And on that note, please do not listen to the ridiculous myth that you should carry a balance month to month to please the credit card company, because that is complete nonsense and is not based in fact at all. Remember that your credit score is just a math problem at the end of the day. So whether you pay the credit card company a ton of interest and fees, or you reap all of the benefits and get tens of thousands of dollars of free travel points, it really doesn't matter what the credit card company thinks about you, because that has no impact on your credit score. All right, so we'll recap all of that in a more concise way at the end of the video, but there's still some important questions that you'll need to ask in order to get that 850 score. First of all, is it possible to get an 850 credit score, and how long is that actually going to take? Well, obviously the answer to the first part of that question is yes, it is possible, but only 21% have a score of 800 or better, and just 1% have a score of 850. Now, as to the second part of that question, I'm not gonna lie to you, getting a perfect credit score is likely going to take a very, very long time. But let me remind you that you do not need a perfect credit score in order to reap the many advantages of having good credit. Most lenders are just going to give you ranges of credit scores like poor credit, bad credit, great credit, or excellent credit. And while every lender is going to be a little bit different, the advantages for an individual with an 850 credit score versus someone with an 800 credit score are little to nothing in my experience. And even someone in the mid to high 700s is still going to reap most of the benefits. Plus, the good news is that getting a score in the mid to high 700s can be done with literally one account in a matter of months. And I know that because I was able to get a score of 760 using one free credit card when I turned 18, and it took me just a few short months. But by far, outside of all of that, the most important question you want to ask is, why do this? Well, the obvious answer is better credit will decrease your interest rates and therefore save you money when it comes time to borrow money. If you borrowed $400,000 on a house, for example, then on a 30-year mortgage, even with a score in the low 600s, which is honestly not that bad, you'd be looking at a rate of about 7% on average right now, meaning you would pay $548,000 in interest over the life of that loan. Compare that to someone with nearly perfect credit who could get a rate closer closer to 5% or less right now, and they would pay just $329,000 in interest for the exact same loan. And that's a difference of $219,000 just for having a good credit score. And obviously that is an extreme example, but long story short, better credit can save you a lot of cash in the long term, not to mention the fact that it can also affect your ability to rent an apartment, rent a car, and so many other aspects of your life. So there is a lot we can learn from those individuals with a perfect credit score, and I know that I threw a lot at you in this video, but in a nutshell, open a variety of credit accounts if you can and have a reason to do so, and then keep them open as long as possible. Always pay them off on time without fail, and when it comes to credit cards specifically, get your credit limit as high as possible and keep the balances on those cards as low as possible. And with those simple steps, you will be well on your way to achieving a perfect credit score for completely free. I'd love to know what you think of this topic down in the comment section below, and whether or not you think it is even necessary to have a perfect credit score. Personally, I am happy with my score in the high 700s, and once again, I don't really think it is necessary to take on consumer debt just for the sake of getting a better interest rate when I borrow money. Be sure to check out some of my favorite financial tools using those links down below the like button, and as always, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it so much. Take it easy, and I'll see you in the next one.